Hello and welcome to the Jamaica Mix, a podcast where we dig into the issues shaping Jamaica. And it's democracy, governance, and public life. Of course, I'm your host, Mr. B. And today I want to step into some uncomfortable territory. And it is uncomfortable simply because the truth is uncomfortable. Now, if this is the first time you're tuning into this channel, I'm gonna ask you if you like the material to just hit the like button, clang the notification bell, and if you haven't done so, we're gonna invite you to subscribe to the channel so that when we present discussions like this, you are among the first to um, be made aware. Now, Jamaica is facing an economic storm that is far larger than the hurricane that we have just endured. Of course, many Jamaicans have no idea what is coming. So let us break down the reality, the projections, and what the next 6 months in Jamaica is going to be looking like. Now, before I proceed, though, just want to touch on an observation here. I want to address something that, every time I raise critical questions or point out contradictions in the government's messaging, some people basically want to jump on the material, accuse me tearing down the country, because what they want is they want praise, they want cheerleading. My view is that Jamaica don't really need the pom-pom ceremonies right now. What Jamaica need is clarity, honesty, and firm strategic thinking. My role is not to flatter politicians. In fact, that is not in my DNA. My role is to analyze issues, identify risks, and to share knowledge so that the average Jamaican out there can be better prepared. Now, let's talk about the coming economic storm. Now, the numbers don't lie. Jamaica, based on what we have experienced with this hurricane, will likely lose over a third of its GDP, gross domestic product, in the coming year. And why is that, you might ask? Well, that is because the storm did not merely just blow down trees and blow off zinc off a people's roof. The storm struck the beating heart of the Jamaican economy. It struck tourism, it struck agriculture, it struck housing, it also hit transportation networks and micro business clusters. And now, and behind closed doors, both public and private sector leaders know this, but the public is being soothed with what I refer to as comforting language. Language that say we're gonna be building back stronger, or language that says we're bouncing back. And while those statements sound good, the reality is that they do not reflect the gravity of the situation that Jamaica is facing at this time. So, first of all, let's talk about the cost. There is a $1.5 trillion repair bill that Jamaica is going to have to foot that bill. So let's talk money. The estimated cost, again, 1.5 trillion. And so what we want to do is to compare that money, that cost, to the donations that we've been receiving, donor gifts, grant funding, and potential insurance payouts. Now, all of that combined is still going to be a drop in a massive bucket, because at some point, donors at the international level and even at the local level are going to step back, because that is how disaster cycles work. Locally, Jamaica is going to have to address two options. The first one is that we are going to have to be borrowing heavily, and that borrowing is either going to be international borrowing, or local borrowing, or combinations of both, as well as, because I looked at it as an option. It really isn't an option. It is, in addition to that, the government is going to have to raise taxes, raise a lot of taxes out of what's happening in the economy. Both of these decisions are going to carry enormous consequences. First of all, if you're borrowing internationally, international loan transactions come with foreign exchange exposure. If you go the local route to try to evade the foreign exchange risks, those local borrowing locally, when a government borrows locally, which means that you're borrowing through the commercial banking sector that is within the country. What that kind of local borrowing does is that it crowds out small businesses who cannot compete with the government for capital. And what this in turn does is that it slows down the economic recovery even further. The foreign exchange tsunami, a piece of it I touched on in terms of the international borrowing. Now, tourism is down. And of course, you don't need no glasses to know that tourism is the major generator of foreign exchange in for the Jamaican economy. That means that fewer US dollars are going to be flowing in. There is every effort on the part of the tourism fraternity to try to get their properties open. But a lot of these properties are owned by international conglomerates. And if they are damaged, those conglomerates are going to want to proceed with repairs utilizing the insurances available on these properties. And that takes time. So there is going to be a sort of a lapse in which some of these properties will be reopening. And so don't expect to see a full rollout of Jamaica's tourism product before, say, March of next year, because a number of the properties have already closed. Thank God for those properties who decided that, listen, even though the or tourism inflows are still on a low scale, they're not cutting back the staff. And, we just want to thank those properties who are taking that position, so that at least the employees of these hotels are not having to go home and look at each other because they have no income. Now, back to the foreign exchange tsunami. With tourism down, at the same time, our agriculture has been destroyed, and that is going to need, at a minimum, say 4 to 6 months or 6 to 8 months before that recovers. That means that we are going to be importing a lot of the food that Jamaicans eat. We will also have to be importing a lot of building materials, lumber, zinc, plyboard, nails, all of this, steel. We are going to be needing to import machinery, and all of this requires more foreign exchange. Now, with your foreign exchange inflows down, as per tourism, with a significant percentage of the country's landscape basically being out of commission, in terms of we're looking at almost all of Cornwall and a little piece of Middlesex, which includes Manchester and Trelawney. What it means is your earning potential is cut 30%, but your import requirements are going in the opposite direction, because you're not able to produce food to domestic agriculture to feed Jamaicans, as well as for those businesses like the hotels, who will require foreign exchange, foreign imports to run their operations. So this is pointing to a devaluation of the Jamaican dollar. My sense is that when I look at a Jamaican dollar that is pushing anywhere between 190 to in excess of $200 Jamaican to one United States dollar. Now, this is not panic talk. This is plain and simple mathematics. Imagine a household with shrinking income and skyrocketing bills. Something must give. And this is what Jamaica is right now. On top of that, there is a massive housing crisis. 146,000 homes, according to the Prime Minister's announcement, have been damaged or destroyed. And here's a real problem with that. Most of these homes were uninsured. Now, if you think back with Hurricane Gilbert, when Gilbert hit, it hit a big part of the metropolitan section of the island, Kingston, St. Andrew, the developed areas, most of which the properties were covered by insurance. And so what we had is a lot of insurance money being pumped into the economy as we got out of we recovered from Hurricane Gilbert. That is not the case in this particular instance. A majority of these 146,000 houses that were destroyed were owned by people who don't have insurance, or they were not even properly constructed structures because of where the hurricane hit. And so these people have to be rehoused. The question is, how are we going to do that? We can talk about building, as we the Prime Minister announcing this thing about bringing in container housing. It sounds like a good idea as an expedient. Bottom line is to ask a Jamaican to pay $3.5 million for a container, sardine pan, a disposable item, because that's what it is. A container is not a meaningful investment or asset that you can consider as an investment, because the minute you move it on the back of the truck to take it out there, depreciation is going to factor. The other question is, how are we going to pay for it? Unless the government plan to give these 5,000 or whatever containers to people who can't afford it, and even then the money has to be found to pay for it. Somebody out there import these containers. And so how you will get Jamaicans to pay for it? Because if a man could have barely find money to buy a night dinner, where you get money from? What is the asset you're going to use to be able to borrow $3.5 million? And then by the time you don't pay for it, you'd have paid over $6, $7 to $10 million on a depreciating asset that at the time you don't pay for it, it's not worth nothing. Something to think about. Now, the result of all of this is that people who don't have this kind of money are going to be rebuilding, and they will rebuild from whatever scraps them can find in terms of material. And they at the same time, because of the problems with the housing crisis, what is going to happen is a lot of more people are going to fall deeper into debt, or the combination of people leaving these parishes altogether. Of course, when people migrate, communities collapse and die. Schools shrink, business districts wither, and parish economies will quietly die. Now, the clincher with all of this, is that with all of what is happening, all of this is happening at a time when Jamaica could not be more divided politically than at this time. I'm a over 60-year-old individual, and I have never seen Jamaica as divided as we are now. Granted, I lived through the 70s where the political divide was there, but the partisan lines today have hardened considerably. And so everything that is discussed is either now is a JLP versus PNP discussion. Every factual analysis is seen as a political attack. The truth is that countries do not survive crises through division. You survive through collective purpose. What we need at this point in time in Jamaica is honesty from the state. We need accountability from institutions. And of course, we need unity among the citizens. But the political leadership have to start by setting those examples. There seems to be no understanding of what the term, reaching out with an olive branch really means. And so the question that it begs is, how do we find a middle ground? To navigate the next 6 months, Jamaica must stop sugarcoating the reality and bring all of the stakeholders to the table. The private sector, civil society, the political leadership at both government and opposition levels. They must begin to tell the people the truth about what lies ahead. We have to build bipartisan agreements on this whole question of reconstruction. We also must prepare households for the financial shocks that lays in the wings. We need to encourage local production wherever possible and to try to stimulate it to the point where it gets going as early as is humanly possible. So this is not a time for spin. We love this thing. We've gotten into this habit of we have these press conferences and all you're getting is spin and even more spin. That is not necessary at this point. What is necessary now is survival planning. And our leadership have to basically be more open and honest, transparent. Tell people what's happening. People need to know, because that's the only way that people are going to be able to prepare themselves. So, folks, I'm just closing by saying that there is another storm coming, and this is going to be an economic storm. And unless we face it head on with honesty and unity, we're going to be blindsided again. This is not fear mongering. Let me make that clear. Far from it. What I am presenting to you is a call to action. A nation that knows the truth can prepare. A nation kept in the dark will only suffer. Let me thank you again for listening. Stay informed, stay alert, and above all, stay united. If you like the material, again, ask you, hit the like button. And of course, share this conversation. Have discussions in your own groups. Talk about the issues, right? It doesn't necessarily have to follow as I have presented. Of course, I'm looking forward to your comments in your feedback in the comment section. Tell me what you think about the meeting. And again, remember, this is not a fear-mongering thing. I just want Jamaicans to be realistic, to know, because when you have the knowledge, you're able to plan better and to prepare yourself. Big up on yourself.